Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the universe decided to ruin his day. The bridge of the New Horizon hummed with its usual quiet activity as the crew went about their routine tasks. They were 3 weeks into what should have been a simple mapping mission on the edge of known space, cataloging star systems that nobody had bothered to visit yet. Dr. Lisa Carter sat at her science station, frowning at the readings on her screen. For the past hour, she had been tracking some strange energy patterns from a nearby star system. The signals were unlike anything in their database, but that was normal for unexplored space. Every few days they found something new that made the scientists back home excited. "Captain," she called out, "I'm getting some weird readings from the Kepler 442 system. The energy signatures don't match any known phenomena." Morrison nodded absently. Lisa always found something interesting to puzzle over. It was one of the reasons she was the best science officer in the fleet. Anything dangerous? Hard to say. The patterns are very regular, almost like they're artificial, but the power levels are off the charts. Whatever's generating them would have to be massive. Before Morrison could respond, the space in front of them began to shimmer. The stars wavered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Then reality tore open with a sound that their ships' computers couldn't properly translate, something between a roar and a whisper that made everyone's teeth ache. The thing that emerged from the tier in space was the largest ship any of them had ever seen. It dwarfed the New Horizon like a whale next to a minnow. The hull was a dark purple metal that seemed to absorb light, and strange symbols glowed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Weapon ports lined its sides like the eyes of some enormous predator. "Sweet mother of pearl," whispered Navigator Amy Brooks. The massive ship hung in space before them, silent and menacing. The New Horizon's instruments went crazy, alarms blaring as exotic radiation washed over them. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red as the computer tried to process readings that shouldn't exist. "Report," Morrison barked, his coffee forgotten. "Sir, that thing is putting out more energy than a small star," Carter said, her voice tight with disbelief. "The radiation alone should have fried our electronics, but somehow our shields are holding." Communications Officer Pete Johnson looked up from his console. "Captain, we're being hailed." Morrison straightened his uniform and ran a hand through his graying hair. First contact situations were always tricky, but this one felt different. The alien ship radiated menace like heat from a fire. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, then filled with an image that made several crew members step back involuntarily. The being that appeared was 8 feet tall and covered in chitinous armor that gleamed like black metal. 4 arms ended in claws that could probably cut through steel, and compound eyes the size of dinner plates reflected the bridge lights in 1,000 fragments. Mandibles clicked as it spoke, the sound translated by their computers into heavily accented English. "Primitive beings," the creature said, its voice deep and resonant with authority. "I am Supreme Commander Vexthal of the Kethver Empire. You will surrender immediately. Your species will serve the Kethver Empire. Resistance is futile and will result in your extinction." The bridge fell silent. Morrison looked at the towering alien commander, taking in the obvious predator adaptations, the military bearing, the casual assumption of superiority. This was clearly a species that was used to getting its way through intimidation and force. Then something unexpected happened. A small chuckle escaped from Morrison's lips. "Sir?" Johnson asked uncertainly. Morrison tried to compose himself, but the chuckle became a snort, then a full laugh. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his eyes. "Did you just say your empire conquered?" 47 species. "The Kethver have brought order to 47 worlds," Vexthal replied, his mandibles clicking with what might have been pride. "Each species that has encountered our might has submitted to our superior military force." 47, Morrison repeated, and the laughter bubbled up again. This time it was contagious. Carter started giggling, then Brooks, then Johnson. Soon the entire bridge crew was laughing, and they couldn't seem to stop. Vexthal's compound eyes narrowed. "You find your impending servitude amusing?" No, no, Morrison gasped, trying to control himself. It's just... Lisa, remind me, how many species are in our database? Carter pulled up her files, still grinning. As of last month, we've cataloged 3,412 confirmed sentient species in the known galaxy. And how many of those are part of the Galactic Cooperative? About 800, with another 1,000 in various stages of diplomatic contact. Morrison looked back at the alien commander, who was beginning to look less imposing and more confused. So you're telling me that your mighty empire has conquered 47 species in ... how long? 2 centuries of glorious expansion, Vexthal replied, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. 2 centuries, Morrison mused. That's less than 1 species every 4 years. Danny, how long did the Third Solar War last? Engineering. Chief Danny Rodriguez looked up from his console. 30 years, sir, but that was just humans fighting humans. And how many people were involved in that one? About 2 billion combatants across 4 star systems. The laughter started again, and this time even the normally serious Carter was wiping tears from her eyes. Captain, she managed between giggles, didn't your grandmother always say she could conquer the galaxy if she put her mind to it? She did indeed, Morrison replied. And she probably could have done it faster than these folks. Vexthal's confusion was evident even through the translation barrier. You mock the might of the Kethver Empire? Not mocking, Morrison said, finally getting his laughter under control. It's just ... Well, 47 conquests is pretty impressive for a regional power. It's just that the galaxy is a lot bigger than you might think. The Supreme Commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound their computers translated as agitation. Regional power? We are the supreme military force in the universe. Oh, I'm sure you are, Morrison said kindly, in your region. Of the universe is a pretty big place. On the screen, Vexthal drew himself up to his full, intimidating height. We possess weapons that can crack planets. Our fleets have swept across the stars for 2 centuries. No force can stand against us. Planets, you say? Morrison looked around at his crew. We have those too? We just don't use them much anymore. Bad for the environment. The alien commander stared at them for a long moment, his compound eyes reflecting the bridge lights. For the first time in his long military career, Supreme Commander Vexthal of the Kethver Empire found himself at a complete loss for words, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice was beginning to whisper that perhaps the universe was not quite what he had always believed it to be. Vexthal decided he needed to reassert control over this situation. The humans were clearly confused about the reality of their position. Perhaps a demonstration of Kethver military might would clarify matters for them. Weapons Officer Kralthik. He commanded, "Power up the main plasma cannons." The bridge of the Dominion's wrath hummed with deadly energy as the massive weapons systems came online. The plasma cannons were the pride of Kethver engineering, capable of boring through a mountain in seconds and turning entire cities into glass. Their targeting systems locked onto the tiny human vessel. "Primitive beings," Vexthal announced, "witness the power of the Kethver Empire. Our weapons can reduce your vessel to its component atoms." On the human ship, an alert chimed softly. The weapons officer, a young man named Sam Parker, looked up from his console. "Captain, the alien ship is powering up some kind of energy weapons. Pretty impressive energy signature. Should we be worried?" Morrison asked. Parker studied his readings. "Not really, sir. Their weapons are putting out about 50 terawatts. That's enough to do some real damage to unshielded targets." "What about our shields?" "Our shields can handle about 200 terawatts without breaking a sweat. These weapons wouldn't even make our paint job fade." Morrison nodded and turned back to the alien commander. "Those are some nice weapons you've got there. Very impressive energy output." Vexthal's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Finally, these humans were showing proper respect for Kethver military technology. "You recognize the superiority of our armaments?" "Oh, they're quite good for their size," Morrison replied. "Sam, what class would you put those weapons in?" "Civilian." Grade, sir? Maybe light patrol vessel armament? They're running hot plasma through magnetic containment fields. It's a solid design, just not very efficient. Civilian grade? Vexthal's voice rose. These weapons have cracked the shields of every vessel they have faced. I'm sure they have, Parker said kindly. They're perfectly adequate weapons for their technology level. We used similar designs about 300 years ago. Dr. Carter looked up from her science station. Captain, I've been scanning their ship. The technology is quite interesting from a historical perspective. How so? Well, they're using chemical rockets for maneuvering thrusters, and their main engines appear to be some kind of fusion drive system. It's actually quite clever engineering for developing spacefaring civilization. Chemical rockets? Morrison raised an eyebrow. How do they maneuver in combat? Very slowly, I would imagine, Carter replied. Their thrust-to-weight ratio is probably terrible. Vexthal's compound eyes bulged. Our vessels are the fastest and most maneuverable in the galaxy. We can achieve significant fractions of light speed. Significant fractions? Rodriguez looked up from his engineering station. What do you consider significant? Our fastest vessels can reach 12% of light speed. Vexthal said proudly. The human bridge fell silent for a moment, then the laughter started again, even louder than before. 12%? Brooks wiped tears from her eyes. That's adorable. Commander, Morrison said, trying to compose himself, what is your ship's maximum velocity? The Dominion's Wrath can achieve 15% of light speed in open space. Vexthal replied, his voice beginning to lose some of its authority. 15%, Morrison mused. Sam, what's our top speed? The New Horizon can do 98% of light speed in normal space, Parker replied. She's not even a military vessel, just an exploration ship built for long-range surveys. 98%? Vexthal's translator struggled with the concept. That is impossible. No vessel can achieve such velocities. Actually, it's not that impressive, Carter said. Military vessels can hit 99.8% of light speed. The real trick is the hyperspace drives. Hyperspace drives? For faster-than-light travel, Morrison explained. Though I suppose you don't have those yet, since you're still using that dimensional tier technology. Our fold-space drives are the pinnacle of HFY science, Vexthal protested. Oh, those are fold-space drives, Carter said with interest. I thought they looked familiar. We experimented with similar technology about 200 years ago, but the energy requirements were too high. Too high? It takes enormous amounts of power to tear a hole in space-time, Rodriguez explained. Our hyperspace drives slip between dimensions instead of forcing their way through. Much more efficient, Vexthal's tactical mind reeled. These humans discussed faster-than-light travel as if it were routine technology. They spoke of 99% light speed as if it were merely adequate performance. What is your vessel's armament? He asked, dreading the answer. Armament? Morrison looked puzzled. We're an exploration ship. We don't carry military weapons. Relief flooded through Vexthal's system. At least these humans weren't armed with weapons that matched their apparent technological superiority. We do have some basic defensive systems, Parker added. Standard antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors, that sort of thing. Antimatter? Vexthal's voice cracked. You possess antimatter weapons? Well, sure. Any first-year physics student can synthesize antimatter in small quantities. It's not exactly rocket science, Parker said with a shrug. How many of these antimatter weapons do you carry? Oh, about 40 torpedoes. Plus the quantum disruptors, but those are mainly for clearing space debris. 40 antimatter weapons on a civilian exploration vessel. The HFY Empire had 3 antimatter warheads in their entire arsenal, and they were considered the ultimate weapons of mass destruction. The quantum disruptors, Vexthal asked weakly. What is their purpose? They break down matter at the subatomic level, Carter explained. Very useful for clearing asteroid fields or salvaging wrecked ships. We use them for mining operations too. Mining operations? Sure, Point them at an asteroid, dial down the power, and you can extract pure metals without all the messy refining. Very environmentally friendly. Vexthel stared at the humans in growing horror. They used weapons that could disintegrate matter. At the molecular level for mining operations. They carried 40 antimatter warheads on a civilian vessel. They discussed technology that was centuries beyond anything the Kethver had ever dreamed of, as if it were commonplace. "Commander," his weapons officer reported privately, "our targeting computers cannot lock onto their vessel." "Why not? Unknown, sir." "Their hull appears to be shifting in and out of phase with normal space. Our weapons cannot achieve a target lock." "Shifting in and out of phase?" "It appears to be some kind of defensive system we have never encountered." On the human ship, an alert chimed. "Captain," Johnson reported, "they're trying to target us with their weapons." "Are they having any luck?" Morrison asked. "No, sir. The phase shifters are working perfectly. Their targeting systems can't get a lock." "Phase shifters?" Vexthel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Standard defensive technology," Morrison explained. "We shift our ships slightly out of phase with normal space. Makes it very difficult for conventional weapons to hit us. But you can still function normally." "Oh, sure. We're only shifted about 0.01% out of phase. Barely noticeable to the crew, but enough to confuse most targeting systems." Vexthel, slow? Worldview continued its steady collapse. These humans casually manipulated the fundamental structure of space-time for routine defensive purposes. They spoke of antimatter and quantum physics as if they were discussing the weather. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should discuss terms of mutual cooperation." The humans looked at each other and started laughing again. "Terms?" Morrison chuckled. "We're not here to negotiate anything. We're just explorers having a friendly chat with new neighbors." And for the first time in his long military career, Supreme Commander Vexthel began to wonder if perhaps the Kethver Empire had been thinking far too small about the nature of the universe. Supreme Commander Vexthel had faced down the fiercest warriors of 47 worlds. He had seen entire civilizations fall to their knees before the might of the Kethver Empire. He had watched proud species weep as their homeworlds burned. But in 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The sound coming from the human ship was completely alien to him. Their database had no classification for it. The humans were making a rhythmic noise that seemed to come from deep in their bodies, their faces contorted in what looked like pain but clearly wasn't. Some of them were leaking fluid from their optical organs. "Explain this behavior," Vexthel demanded of his communications officer. "Unknown, Supreme Commander." The translation matrix identifies the sound as laughter, but provides no context for its use in military situations. Vexthel focused his compound eyes on the human captain. The being was small by Kethver standards, soft-looking, with no visible natural weapons. Yet he sat in his command chair as if he owned the universe, making this strange noise that set Vexthel's mandibles on edge. "You find your impending servitude amusing?" Vexthel tried again, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had crushed the spirits of countless enemies. The human captain wiped moisture from his eyes. Sorry. It's just that we weren't expecting to meet anyone way out here." "Lisa, didn't the xenobiology report say the Kethver were supposed to be the ultimate military force in the galaxy?" The female human at the science station looked up from her display. "According to our database, they've conquered 47 species in the last 2 centuries. They seem quite proud of that number." 47 species in 200 years? Another human, this one with darker skin and grease stains on his uniform, shook his head. "That's less than 1 species every 4 years. My grandmother could conquer faster than that, and she's been dead for 20 years. The bridge erupted in fresh laughter. Vexthel's tactical computer ran rapid calculations, trying to understand what he was witnessing. These creatures spoke of conquest as if it were a casual activity, something their elderly relatives could accomplish with ease. "You speak of warfare as if it were commonplace," Vexthel said, his voice tight with confusion. Well, it kind of is, the captain replied. I mean, we've gotten better about it lately, but humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. It's sort of what we do. Thousands of years? Oh yeah. We've had some real knockdown, drag-out fights. The Third Solar War alone lasted 30 years and involved 2 billion people. That was just in our own star system. Vexthel's mandibles clicked rapidly. 2 billion combatants in a single conflict? The largest battle in Kethver history had involved barely 2 million warriors, and that was considered a massive engagement. You fought a war involving 2 billion of your own species? Well, we had some disagreements about mining rights and territorial boundaries, the captain said with a shrug. You know how it is? Vexthel did not know how it was. The Kethver had never fought among themselves on such a scale. Their society was built on rigid hierarchy and absolute obedience to the Empire. The idea of billions of individuals choosing to fight their own kind was beyond his comprehension. But that's ancient history, the female navigator added. We're much more civilized now. Haven't had a really good war in 50 years. A good war? Vexthel's translator struggled with the concept. One where you really get to test your new equipment and tactics, the captain explained. These days, we mostly just argue about trade routes and mining rights. It's all very boring and diplomatic. The human at the communications station looked up from his panel. Captain, we're getting an automated check-in from Sector Command. They want to know if we need any assistance. Tell them we're fine, Morrison replied, just having a chat with some new neighbors. Vexthel watched this exchange with growing alarm. The humans were treating this first contact as if it were a routine social call. They showed no fear, no respect for Kethver military might, no understanding of the gravity of their situation. Should I mention the Kethver Empire? The communications officer asked. Might as well. Fleet intelligence likes to keep track of new contacts. The casual way the humans discussed their military hierarchy sent chills through Vexthel's chitin. They spoke of fleet intelligence and sector command as if they were part of some vast military organization. How many humans were there? How many ships? How many sectors? Your species maintains a military fleet? Vexthel asked. Several, actually, the captain replied. The exploration fleet, the defense fleet, the merchant marine, the colonial guard. We've got ships scattered across about 400 star systems. 400 systems. The entire Kethver Empire controlled less than 60 star systems, and they considered themselves masters of space. These humans casually mentioned 400 systems as if it were nothing special. Captain, the communications officer said, Sector Command is asking about our new contacts. They want to know if we've encountered a previously unknown species. Tell them yes, and that they seem friendly enough. A bit old-fashioned in their approach to diplomacy, but harmless. Old-fashioned? Harmless? Vexthel's compound eyes narrowed. You consider the Kethver Empire harmless? Well, you haven't actually threatened us, the captain pointed out. I mean, you talked about conquest and servitude, but that's just standard first contact bluster, right? Nobody actually does that sort of thing anymore. We do, Vexthel said firmly. The Kethver Empire has brought order to 47 worlds through strength and determination. Right, but that was probably a long time ago, the science officer said kindly. Most species go through a military expansion phase when they first discover space travel. It's perfectly natural. We did the same thing. You expanded through military conquest? Oh, sure. We fought wars over every habitable planet we found for about 100 years. Made a real mess of things. But we grew out of it eventually. Vexthel's worldview tilted on its axis. These humans spoke of galactic conquest as if it were a phase of adolescent development that civilized species eventually outgrew. They discussed warfare with the casual familiarity of experts who had moved on to more sophisticated pursuits. What is your current military strength? He asked. The captain looked around at his crew. Danny, what's the current fleet size? The engineer consulted his tablet. Last I heard, about 12,000 ships in active service, but that's just the human fleet. The cooperative has a lot more ships than that. The cooperative? The Galactic Cooperative. It's a loose alliance of species that work together on trade, defense, scientific research, that sort of thing. Nothing too formal, just neighbors helping neighbors. 12,000 ships. The Kethver Empire had 300 vessels, and they were considered the dominant naval force in their region. These humans casually mentioned 12,000 ships as if it were a modest number. How many species belong to this cooperative? Vexthal asked. Oh, about 800 active members, the captain replied. Maybe another 1,000 in various stages of diplomatic contact. We're always meeting new people. 800 species working together. 1,000 more in diplomatic contact. The Kethver had conquered 47 species and considered themselves rulers of the galaxy. These humans were part of an alliance that dwarfed the entire known universe as far as Vexthal understood it. For the first time in his long military career, Supreme Commander Vexthal of the Kethver Empire began to suspect that his understanding of the galaxy might be somewhat limited, and the humans were still making that strange laughing sound. The conversation that followed would forever change how both species viewed the universe. What started as a simple exchange of information slowly revealed the massive gap in understanding between the Kethver Empire and the rest of galactic civilization. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Vexthal said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining composure. Your species has been traveling between stars for how long? About 400 years, Morrison replied. Though we only started serious expansion about 2 centuries ago. We were too busy fighting each other for the first couple of centuries. Fighting each other? Your own species? Oh yeah, we had some real wars back then. The Second Martian Rebellion, the Titan mining conflicts, the Great Asteroid Belt War, those were some nasty fights. Dr. Carter pulled up historical data on her tablet. The Third Solar War alone involved over 2 billion combatants across 4 star systems. It lasted 30 years and nearly bankrupted 3 different colonial governments. Vexthal S. Tactical. Computer worked frantically to process these numbers. 2 billion combatants. The entire Kethver Empire had a population of only 8 billion across all their conquered worlds. These humans had fielded military forces equal to a quarter of his entire empire's population in a single conflict. 2 billion soldiers in one. War? He asked. Well, not all soldiers, Rodriguez corrected. That includes support personnel, fleet crews, logistics specialists, combat engineers. The actual ground forces were probably only about 400 million. Only 400 million, Vexthal repeated weakly. It was considered a major conflict, Morrison added. We lost about 40 million people just in the Battle of Europa. Terrible business, really. The casualty reports took months to compile. 40 million casualties in a single battle. The largest engagement in Kethver history had involved 2 million warriors total, and they had considered it an epic clash worthy of songs. You speak of these losses as if they were acceptable, Vexthal observed. Not acceptable, Carter said sadly. Just inevitable. When you have billions of people spread across dozens of star systems, conflicts tend to get out of hand quickly. We learned to be more careful after the Third Solar War. More careful how? Better diplomacy, mostly. Economic cooperation instead of military conquest. We found it was much more profitable to trade with people than to fight them. But you still maintain military forces? Of course, Morrison said. There are always pirates, raiders, the occasional territorial dispute, plus exploration ships. Like this one need protection from hostile environments. How many ships does your military operate? The bridge crew exchanged glances. That's actually a complicated question, Brooks said. Which military are you asking about? You have multiple. Militaries? Well, there's the Human Defense Fleet, the Colonial Guard, the Merchant Marine, the Exploration Service, Johnson listed. Each one serves different functions. The total number of vessels? Vexthal pressed. Last official count was around 12,000 active ships, Rodriguez said. But that doesn't include reserve fleets, civilian auxiliaries, or allied vessels? 12,000 ships. The Kethver Empire had 300 vessels and considered themselves masters of space warfare. Allied vessels? Vexthal asked. Ships from other species in the Galactic Cooperative, Morrison explained. We work together on defense, exploration, trade protection, that sort of thing. How many species are part of this cooperative? About 800 active members, Carter replied. Another 1,000 or so in various stages of contact and negotiation. The numbers hit Vexthal like physical blows. 800 species working together. 1,000 more in diplomatic contact. His empire had conquered 47 species and thought they ruled the galaxy. These 800 species, he said slowly, they all maintain military forces? Most of them. Some are pacifist civilizations that focus on science or art, but yes, most species maintain some level of defense. Capability. And they coordinate these forces when necessary. We have joint training exercises, shared logistics networks, standardized communication protocols. It makes things much easier when we need to respond to threats. What kind of threats require? The combined military forces of 800 species? Morrison's expression grew serious. Rogue artificial intelligences, interdimensional invasions, galactic-scale natural disasters, things that are too big for any one species to handle alone. Interdimensional. Invasions? They're rare, but they happen. About 50 years ago, something tried to break through from a parallel universe. Took the combined fleets of 20 species to push them back. Vexthal's understanding of reality continued to crumble. These humans spoke of threats that required the combined might of multiple civilizations. They discussed interdimensional warfare as if it were a routine occurrence. The 47 species we have conquered, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Are they part of your database? Carter consulted her files. Let me check. Can you provide their names or stellar coordinates? Vexthal transmitted the data, watching as the human science officer reviewed the information. Her expression grew puzzled. That's odd, she said. These species are all from the same region of space, about 8,000 light-years from here. We haven't made contact with anyone in that sector yet. You haven't made contact with them? No, it's pretty far out on the galactic rim. We usually focus our exploration efforts on regions with higher stellar density, more chance of finding developed civilizations. The implications hit Vexthal like a collapsing star. The 47 species his empire had conquered weren't even on the galactic community's map. They were so remote, so insignificant that no one had bothered to make contact with them. So the Kethver Empire operates in an unexplored region? He asked. Apparently so, Morrison said. Though that's not unusual. The galaxy is enormous. We're discovering new species all the time. How large is the explored region of the galaxy? Carter brought up a star chart on the main screen. A complex three-dimensional map appeared, showing thousands of star systems connected by trade routes and communication networks. Bright clusters indicated major civilizations, while colored zones showed different political and economic alliances. This is the current map of known space, she said. The blue areas are cooperative territory, green zones are independent systems, red areas are restricted or dangerous regions. Vexthal stared at the map in growing horror. The explored region covered roughly a quarter of the galaxy. Thousands of star systems, hundreds of major civilizations, vast networks of trade and communication, spanning incredible distances. Where is Kethver space on this map? He asked. Carter consulted the coordinates he had provided earlier. Way out here, she said, highlighting a tiny area on the very edge of the map. It's so far out that it's barely visible at this scale. The area she indicated was microscopic compared to the vast networks of civilizations spread across the galactic map. The mighty Kethver Empire, terror of 47 worlds, occupied a space so small it barely registered on the chart. So we are, Vexthal said slowly, insignificant. Not insignificant, Morrison said kindly. Just ... remote, and maybe a bit isolated, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some species prefer to develop on their own before making contact with the larger galactic community. The larger galactic community that we knew nothing about. That happens more often than you'd think. The galaxy is a big place and space is mostly empty. It's easy for civilizations to develop in isolation. Vexthal's compound eyes focused on the star chart, studying the vast networks of civilization that existed beyond his empire's borders. Everything he had believed about Kethver supremacy, their destiny to rule the galaxy, their technological and military superiority, was revealed to be the delusion of a small civilization that had never looked beyond its own tiny corner of space. For the first time in his long military career, Supreme Commander Vexthal of the Kethver Empire understood just how small he really was in the vast universe. The silence that followed stretched between the two ships like a vast gulf. Vexthal stared at the galactic map, his compound eyes tracking the countless star systems that existed beyond his empire's knowledge. 3 centuries of military service, 47 conquered worlds, and the absolute certainty that the Kethver were destined to rule the galaxy had all crumbled in the space of a single conversation. "So you're saying," Vexthal finally spoke, his voice stripped of all authority, "that my empire is considered insignificant by galactic standards?" "Not insignificant," Dr. Carter said gently. "Just small. Very small, like astronomically small." Morrison leaned forward in his captain's chair. "Look, Commander, 47 conquests is actually pretty impressive for a regional power. You've built something substantial out there on the rim. But we are not the supreme military force in the galaxy." "Well, no," Morrison admitted, "but neither are we. There are species out there that make humans look like we're throwing rocks and sticks, the Andromedans, for instance. They've been spacefaring for 50,000 years, 50,000 years? Give or take a few millennia," Carter added. "They have ships the size of small moons and can manipulate matter at the quantum level. Makes our antimatter torpedoes look like firecrackers," Rodriguez nodded. "And the crystalline entities from the Magellanic Clouds? They don't even use ships. They just think themselves from one star system to another." "Think themselves? Pure energy beings," Brooks explained. "They exist as living thought patterns that can reshape reality by concentrating really hard. It's actually quite beautiful to watch if you can comprehend it." Vexthal's tactical mind struggled to process this information. Beings of pure energy that could travel between stars through thought alone? Civilizations 50,000 years old with moon-sized vessels? The universe was not just larger than he had imagined, it was stranger and more wondrous than his worst. "Nightmares, what happens now?" he asked, dreading the answer. "Do you conquer us? Destroy us for our presumption?" Morrison looked genuinely surprised. "Why would we do that? You haven't actually hurt anybody we care about. Besides, you seem like decent enough people, just maybe a bit sheltered." "Sheltered?" "Cut off from the wider galactic community," Carter explained. "It happens more often than you'd think. Species develop in isolation, build up their own ideas about the universe, then get surprised when they make first contact." "We could offer you membership in the Galactic Cooperative," Johnson suggested. "It's not like we're exclusive. We've got room for everyone who wants to join." "Membership?" Vexthal's mandibles clicked in confusion. "You would invite us to join your alliance after we threatened to conquer you?" "Well, you didn't actually threaten us," Morrison pointed out. "You just explained your usual diplomatic approach." "We've seen worse, much worse," Rodriguez muttered. "Remember the Vorthan hegemony? They actually fired on us before we could explain. We were explorers. What happened to them?" "Oh, they're fine," Morrison said. "Took a while to sort out the misunderstanding, but they're productive members of the cooperative now. They make excellent engineers." Carter pulled up another file on her tablet. "Actually, Commander, your species might be very valuable to the galactic community. Your fold space technology is quite innovative, even if it's energy intensive. We could help you refine it." "You would help us improve our technology?" "Sure, that's what the cooperative is for. Knowledge sharing, mutual aid, collaborative development." Everyone benefits when we work together. Vexthal's understanding of reality continued its fundamental restructuring. These humans were offering to help improve Kethver technology instead of demanding their surrender. They spoke of collaboration instead of conquest, mutual benefit instead of domination. But we are a military empire, he protested. We have conquered other species. So did we, Morrison replied. So did most spacefaring civilizations at some point in their development. It's a phase most species go through when they first discover interstellar travel. A phase? Young civilizations tend to think in terms of competition and conquest, Carter explained. It's natural. But most species eventually realize that cooperation is more profitable than conflict. More profitable? Think about it, Rodriguez said. What do you gain from conquering a species? Their resources, their labor, their technology, but what do you gain from trading with them? The same things, plus their innovation, their creativity, their unique perspectives. And they remain productive partners instead of resentful subjects. The logic was undeniable, but it went against everything Vexthal had been taught about the natural order of the universe. The strong were supposed to dominate the weak. The superior were meant to rule the inferior. Yet these humans suggested a different model entirely. The 47 species we conquered, he said slowly. What should we do about them? That's up to you, Morrison said. But you might consider asking them if they'd like to be partners instead of subjects. Most species prefer having a choice in their own governance, and if they refuse, then you let them go and wish them well. There are plenty of opportunities in the galaxy for everyone. An alert chimed on Johnson's console. Captain, we're getting a priority message from Sector Command. What do they want? Johnson read the message, then looked up with a grin. They want to know if we'd like a diplomatic escort to meet with our new contacts. Apparently, first contact protocols require a proper delegation. A diplomatic delegation? Vexthal asked. Standard procedure, Morrison explained. When we encounter a new spacefaring civilization, we like to do things properly. Official greetings, cultural exchanges, treaty negotiations if you're interested. You would send diplomats to meet with us? Of course. You're potentially the 801st member of the Galactic Cooperative. That's cause for celebration. Carter looked up from her scanner readings. Commander, I'm curious about something. How did your species develop fold space technology in isolation? It's quite advanced for a civilization that hasn't had contact with other spacefaring races. We are naturally gifted engineers, Vexthal said, a note of his old pride returning. The Kethver have always been skilled at manipulating energy and matter. That's exactly the kind of expertise the cooperative values, Morrison said. We have plenty of species that are good at fighting, but innovative engineers are always in demand. The irony was not lost on Vexthal. The military might that his empire had used to conquer 47 worlds was unremarkable by galactic standards. But the engineering skills they had developed in isolation might actually make them valuable contributors to this vast community of civilizations. If we were to join this cooperative, he said carefully, what would be expected of us? Respect for the sovereignty of member species, participation in mutual defense agreements, adherence to basic ethical standards, Carter listed, nothing too demanding. And the species we have conquered would probably be invited to join as, well, if they want to, Morrison said. The galaxy is big enough for everyone. As the conversation continued, Vexthal found his perspective shifting in ways he never could have imagined. The universe was not a place where the strong ruled the weak through force. It was a vast community where different species contributed. Their unique strengths for the benefit of all, the laughter that had begun this encounter, he now realized had not been mockery. It had been the sound of a species that had found genuine joy in discovering something new and unexpected. The humans had laughed not because they thought the Kethver were inferior, but because they were delighted to meet new neighbors in the vast cosmos. Commander Vexthal, Morrison said, using his full title for the first time, I think you're going to like it out here. The galaxy is a lot bigger and friendlier than you might expect. And for the first time in his long military career, the Supreme Commander of the Kethver Empire, found himself looking forward to exploring a universe that was stranger, more wonderful, and infinitely more welcoming than he had ever dared to imagine.